Inside this room, all of my dreams become realities, and some of my realities become dreams.
What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here? Alive! It's alive! It's alive!
You are listening to The Wilder Ride, getting wilder by the minute. Here are your hosts, Alan Sanders and Walt Murray.
Hey everyone, welcome back to The Wilder Ride, where we are getting wilder by the minute, a podcast that celebrates the films of Gene Wilder, one, oh baby, you are so talented and they are so dumb, minute at a time. I'm your host, I'm Alan Sanders.
I am your talented co-host, Walt Murray.
And all that noise you hear in the background is our guest returning from Friday, Kevin Karel. Welcome.
Yes, me and my slurping coffee are also here. Thank you.
I don't know what you're doing. It sounded like you were putting like an erector set together in the background. Oh my God.
Delicious.
He also fills in as the Campbell Soup Kid.
Yes, and Alan was one of the... Alan used to make coffee for me every morning for almost 5 years because despite his harsh, prickly exterior, he's a gooey teddy bear on the inside.
Oh, yeah. I got a soft, gooey center.
He does, and that was good coffee, by the way. And without it, we would have been sunk at 6:30 in the morning.
6:30? Was that when you got in? Because I was going live at 6.
Well,
it was 5:30.
And 6:45, whenever I needed to be there.
Yes, you were the producer. I had to be on air. No, we were on air. We were on air together. My goal, by the way, was to at least try to get him to crack up once or twice during each newscast.
And it usually happened. And let me tell you, living like 5 minutes away at, I don't even know if that apartment complex is still there where I lived, but if I hit the red lights correctly coming down Main Street, I could get to the radio station in 4 minutes. And there was more than one morning where I was like, had a hard time getting up or slept through my alarm. I'm a very hard sleeper and was tearing the asphalt up driving in and was ran in and flipped on the mic to do the news, right as, the music is introing. Alan's holding it he's like, I'm going to have to do it. He's not here. And then I walked in at the last possible second. It's good morning, Bartow County. And no one was the wiser until right now.
And the cat's out of the bag.
Yeah.
Folks, we are getting an inside view of the magic of radio.
Well, it's one of those people often say, and I've heard this so many times, especially in related to radio, where co-hosts or on sports play-by-play teams and stuff, where they say they got along better while they were talking because they weren't friends and didn't hang out when they weren't at work. And that has just never made any sense to me. Alan and I think we're better on air because we were friends. Yeah. And I knew his tendencies and he knew mine. And we hung out after work and on weekends and, getting beers or coffee or whatever we were doing. And I think that made our chemistry on air better, that we did know each other that well. So in that I think that's an urban legend of radio about it being better on air the less you like each other. I don't think that at least to me, that didn't make any sense.
No, and I wouldn't want to have that kind of an on-air partnership or relationship where you were constantly feeling like you're on eggshells off the microphone or off air and then wondering if any of that was ever going to spill on air. No, I believe in just having good, solid friendships and relationships and just go with it and have fun. And I think if you're real and genuine, people pick up on it.
Yeah. Well, and it probably helped that we both had thick skin and could,
oh yeah, you have to
rib each other pretty good and things like that.
Much like Walt, Kevin was raised in the same kind of area where you don't get a trophy for everything. And if you suck, people tell you, and you just have to suck it up and deal with it, Buttercup.
Well, I think that's the best place to be raised because, we've all had terrible jobs. We've all had stuff that we didn't like in life. And if you're not prepared for that, you're in for a long, bad life.
Imagine Sheriff Bart here if he had a thin skin. Look what these folks are doing to him already.
Yeah, he he's getting put through the meat grinder here.
Well, let's go ahead and establish where we are. It is a Monday. Welcome back, everybody. And we are at minute 31 of Blazing Saddles. And we're going to pick up where we left off on Friday with Sheriff Bart holding himself hostage. And we hear him saying, hit me, and eventually, shut up. And he puts his hand over his mouth and goes into the jail. And we're going to end with Reverend Johnson saying, expressing our feelings about the new sheriff. So let's go ahead and dive into this, guys. And right off the bat, we kick off where we left off from Friday. And we get one more of that back and forth of the two voices that Cleavon Little is using to hold himself hostage, including covering his own mouth up as he pushes himself inside the sheriff's office.
Help me! Somebody help me! Help me! Help me! Help me! Shut up!
One of the great things about that scene to me is that, and I didn't even notice it the first time I watched it, but he's walking into the jail, but he's also resisting walking into the jail. So it's like he's playing both parts, even with his feet in that scene, which I thought was really, really incredible.
Very, very well done. The acting back and forth of being kidnapped and kidnapper. We're going to go look at the script, though, because right at the very beginning of this scene, here are some additional lines that they took out, but were in the script. Because according to the script, as they are backing up to the jailhouse, Bart says, easy now, just a few feet more. Then Bart suddenly makes a run for it, but quickly stops himself with a shot just past his own head. The town gasps. Bart, that was just a warning. The next time he tries it, he gets it right between the eyes. Then Reverend Johnson yells, go along with him, son. There'll be another time. Bart eases himself back slowly until he reaches the jailhouse, and then, as he puts his hand on the door, the last thing we see is the anguished expression as he pushes himself inside, slamming the door.
That would be a very different scene.
Yes, it would be totally different. He makes a run for it, and then he tries to shoot a warning shot past his own head, and then tells himself, just a warning shot, next time between the eyes.
So was the way that was filmed, he just kind of ad-libbed not doing it, and then they thought it was good, so they kept it? How did that happen?
No, this is one of those instances where obviously on the set they realize, okay, this isn't going to work. The joke, the visual gag of how do you run from yourself and shoot a bullet past yourself? It just didn't work. And so whether Mel Brooks said just kind of go with it, or whether they kind of made up something all as a group before they started to shoot the scene, this was not an outtake. They didn't shoot any of this. This was all completely scrapped, and given what we have in the theatrical version, was sort of made up on the spot.
Interesting.
I'm glad. That sounds kind of stupid, and it's way too much. I mean, again, it's another example of the script having too much in the scene, and the way it is on screen is perfect. It's, you know what's going on, but there's not too much. It doesn't drag. It gets the point across and ends.
And I think we've already had the joke. We've already had the townspeople say, hush, Harriet, you're just going to make things worse. Look, man, he's just crazy enough to do it. Did we need one more? Just go along with him, son. There'll be another time. It would have fallen flat, especially given that it was Reverend Johnson who basically told him, you're on your own. Now he's like trying to encourage him. We don't need it.
No, it's perfect the way it is.
Definitely better without.
And then there's also another ad lib, because once inside the jail, Bart has a great line where he breaks the fourth wall.
Oh, baby, you are so talented, and they are so dumb.
But the line was supposed to be, made it, you are so talented, and then throw a hug around himself, and then you would hear, I love you, not here.
What?
Bart saying to himself, made it, you are so talented, I love you, not here.
Huh, okay.
I still, that's funny, but I still like it better how it is.
Yeah, I do too. It is funny though.
Instead of saying made it, he adds, oh, baby, you are so talented, and then added, and they are so dumb. Which is perfect. That's exactly what we need him to say to wrap that moment up.
And the thing I like better about that is that he breaks the fourth wall, where with the other set of lines, it's more just, kind of an internal, external conversation, if that makes sense. It's more of him just talking to himself, where I like him breaking the fourth wall and talking to us.
Yeah. And letting us know, look how stupid these people are in Rockridge.
Yes. And because really that's what it's all about here. So I like what they did with that.
Well, we have very quickly, that wraps up this little moment, because we instantaneously cut to what is in a loud, raucous, somewhat of a town hall meeting that looks like the church has been converted to have one of these town hall meetings. And as the Reverend is trying to get everyone's attention, Gabby's got a flask, and we're going to see in a minute that Olson Johnson is swirling something around while smoking his cigar. Looks like he's grabbing the flask actually from Gabby. So, not exactly the kind of activity you're expecting in church.
No, especially, and I say that as a Catholic, and so I was raised pro booze, but still, this is a bridge too far.
Yeah, depending on what church you're in. I mean, some churches that might help you.
Well, Walt, I mean, name any church, especially in the Old West, where you're smoking cigars indoors and swilling around booze.
No, I think we more transition. I mean, I think it's the same building, but I think we're not in a religious service now. I think this is more of a town meeting, and they got a big problem they got to deal with. And so booze and cigars is the order of the day.
See, I know you're just saying that, but I can't even get my mind around allowing the church to be sullied this way. I get using it for your town hall meeting, but just the irreverence of boozing it up and smoking inside the church, it just doesn't make any sense.
Well, I was in a church in South Georgia one time for a funeral, and I was a kid, and I asked my dad what the holes in the floor were for, and they were spit holes. So guys would chew tobacco and shoot it through the floor. So
gross.
Not every church is like the formal Catholic church you grew up in. But I don't think boozing it up and smoking cigars is acceptable too many places.
The whiskey was necessary as the capper to a great line.
Yeah, I guess. Well, let's break this down like moment for moment here, because while we're trying to get everybody's attention, and slowly the Reverend's going to try to pound the gavel, it's impossible to miss the entire. I don't know if this is everybody of Rockridge, but the names of everybody. You've got their first two initials and the last name. 30 different Johnsons up on that wall.
Every man in the town must be on the town council. I mean, it's 30 people. How do they have more than 30 or 40 men in the town anyway?
Governments are full of Johnsons in every town. We know that.
Every
Amen,
town's
brother.
stuffed with Johnsons.
They sure are.
Everywhere I turn, there's a Johnson staring right at me. I don't want to be there.
Where are you?
That sounds like that I've walked onto the wrong set if I'm hearing that.
Or the wrong podcast, as it were.
Yes. Definitely the wrong something.
Well, are we to guess that even though all those Johnsons are on the town council, it looks like you've got Howard Johnson, you've got Olson Johnson, Gabby Johnson, and Samuel Johnson, all pretty much along the front, as with Reverend Johnson standing there to, I guess, getting ready to call the meeting to order. But would those be then considered the senior elders of the town?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I would think so. And we never really have, we're never introduced to the mayor or anybody like that. We're just to assume these are kind of the elder statesmen, I guess, of the town.
I guess, and I guess we have to include Van Johnson and Harriet Johnson, because that would give 3 on one side, 3 on the other. They just are slumped down a little bit more. But I think Van Johnson and Harriet Johnson look like they're also seated in chairs at the front of the room.
Yeah, and I would assume that Harriet is, they say she's the school marm, so I assume she is kind of looked to write these important letters and document things for the city.
Well, isn't the school marm, isn't that a term for just the school teacher?
Yeah. But she would probably be the most educated person in town, I would guess.
Well, I don't know if it means she'd be the most educated, but just that's her role. She's just the teacher. I would argue the Reverend's got a lot of schooling, and chances are the two business guys that are both to his left and his right probably are pretty intelligent too.
At that time you can't assume that for the typical minister. They could have just been, a guy there that went to church a lot and was devout, and they just didn't have that many Protestant pastors with that level of education.
I mean, the term, when you look it up, a school marm is a woman who's just a school teacher, but that's used in a rural or small town, or a person who exhibits characteristics attributed to school teachers, such as someone who believes in strict adherence to rules.
Oh, that's interesting.
Not really.
He won't hold back, folks.
Well, I just always assumed that it was just a teacher, kind of the one-room schoolhouse. Despite what Kevin said, I'm kind of interested, but not anymore.
Now, yeah. All right. Well, we've got the 3 on each side. The Reverend tries to call order. He says twice very calmly, order, order. I don't normally hear the Reverend take the Lord's name in vain when he's trying to get everybody to come to order.
Order! God damn it! I said order!
No, not often.
No. So we're doing everything wrong in this church.
Yeah, I've been around a good number of men of the cloth, and I don't think I've ever heard any of them use the Lord's name in vain.
No, I've never. I've had my. Okay, let's back up for a second, because we did have a priest with us 2 minutes ago last week, and we had Kevin just join us. Kevin, also a Catholic. I'm a Catholic. We had a Catholic priest. Kevin, I got to ask you the question: when you were raised initially in the Catholic upbringing, were you afraid to have like everyday ordinary conversations with the priest?
I think more than anything, it was fear of him seeing or believing or hearing that I had done something wrong. I went to Catholic elementary school, and several of my teachers were nuns, but the Monsignor was the president. That's the ultimate authority. And we went to mass as a school once a week. And one of my elementary schools, my grandparents I would see them at church, when we would go have the once a week mass where all the different classes went. So I had a lot of eyes on me, and that was like the ultimate form of discipline. You didn't have to go see the Monsignor unless you had done something. If you had napalmed, metaphorically, a situation, you would have to go see. Like, that was major trouble. If it was something that your teacher had to recommend to a priest, your fate was sealed at that point. So yeah, I had seen priests in more informal settings, because I had a great uncle who was a priest, who was a wonderful man, spent holidays with us. And then I was also an altar boy. No need to read anything into that.
It answers so many questions. All those lingering questions I was afraid to ask.
And so the worst thing about that was that the Monsignor at that time was a smoker, and he smoked in the rectory. And so we would be in there like waiting, and we're like, "Jeez, man." He was lighting one off the
just
other.
Just a chain smoker.
And it was, I was bathed in secondhand smoke.
If you had a family member who was a priest, maybe it was different, because I was trying to lean more about, especially as an adult, maybe. It took me a while to feel comfortable being around a man of the cloth, whether it was a priest or a preacher or a reverend, and having kind of just an everyday, ordinary conversation. I kept feeling like, oh my God, he's going to judge me on everything. I can't say what I want to say. I can't act like I want to act. And it took me a while to realize, okay, they're normal people. You don't have to act different. Now, they would love if you would act like nice all the time. But right. I just, being able to sit down and have a beer with a priest, I was like, wait, this is weird.
I got in a decent amount of trouble as a kid, so I had definitely come to fear them.
Well, what about you when it comes to, your thoughts about dealing with a person that is a leader of a church?
I think based on the fact that I was actually in the ministry for a short time and did a year of seminary, I know enough people and have seen enough to know that they're normal people. But as a kid, I was much more intimidated. I really tried to be on my best behavior all the time. I almost had that thing of like, they've got the line to God, and they're gonna fill him in on what I've got going on. But over the years, like I said, as I got older and was around more people, in ministry positions, I realized they're normal people who have normal lives going on and struggle with a lot of the same stuff we do. And now, you still run across that occasional holier than thou kind of person. And, that there's some demons in the background there. But I guess I've come to see that most of them are just normal folks anyway.
Because even though I don't know many priests or reverends or preachers that would take the Lord's name in vain, the conversation taking place all around the reverend, it's obvious none of these townsfolks feel like they need to clean up their act around him.
They don't. They sure don't seem intimidated by him at all.
Now, this line that Howard Johnson has, because when he says, order, order, and then he leans over and goes,
Nietzsche says, out of chaos comes order.
And of course, Olson Johnson goes,
"Oh, blow it out your ass, Howard."
Yeah.
One of the great lines of the movie.
I'm going to go back and say, Walt, maybe you're right. Maybe this guy acts more educated than he is, because that does not exist in Nietzsche, that quote. It exists in the movie Blazing Saddles.
Well, then I'm going to take it as truth. Then I'm going to take that as one of Nietzsche's lines.
The closest that you can find of Nietzsche saying anything to do about chaos is a line from Thus Spoke Zarathustra that says, one must face chaos to give birth to a star.
Alan, you really researched for this episode of this podcast, didn't you?
Well, yeah.
Yeah,
you did a lot of. Technically, it's what we're all supposed to do. Not just come in here and wing it.
Yeah, just wing it.
As it should be.
Yeah, I've seen that movie. We can talk some bullshit. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I like you. We'll do some bullshit. Good talking. That's cool.
Yeah, you got some Jackson's co-host who's never prepared, so I'll fit right in.
Yeah, well, it seems cool. We'll talk Seinfeld. We'll do it. Honestly.
Yeah, look.
Was I supposed to be learned on Nietzsche? No.
Yes. Yeah, I can see it now. Yeah, Alan starts talking like, I don't know, like technical shit. We'll just shut him down and start talking about, something we like.
Like, we'll save Cosmo Kramer for a different day. I know you can't handle that right now.
It is an interesting interchange, and the Reverend even kind of gives that sort of comment of like his facial expression of like, ooh, as Olson Johnson. You get the sense, though, don't you, that Olson Johnson just gets kind of sick of Howard Johnson acting like he's an intellectual?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
He's kind of the Cliff Claiborne of the town. And I could just see people being like, oh, great, here's Howard again.
I mean, because it's a brazen, it's not, you're in the front of the room. This isn't a side conversation, right? I mean, the entire room is watching. And he's like, I'll blow it out your ass, Howard. You're always so full of shit.
Yeah, and I think we can all relate to having been around people like that.
Yes, I think so. We're all here on this podcast right now.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They sometimes bring up...
Oh, I've got some familiarity.
They bring up references to Nietzsche. I'll blow it out your ass. Hey,
it's crossed my mind.
Before we finish up the scene, though, I want to tell you something. According to the script, they changed the order of when this scene was supposed to fall. Because right now it happens the minute we get Sheriff Bart safely in the jail, and he talks about how he was so talented and the town was so dumb. We immediately cut to here. Initially, the script goes right to the campsite of the railroad, and we get the whole Mongo scene, the beans and fart scene. Then, after that, we immediately go to the jail scene where we meet the Waco kid, and they have that exchange back and forth, and they end, the scene's supposed to end with let's play chess. Then we head to the church where we hear order, order, And Howard says, Nietzsche says, out of chaos comes order. I don't think it would have worked that way. I think it makes more sense to happen immediately after we get introduced to the sheriff.
I think so too, and I especially think that because you've come out of so much of that mob mentality, and then you just have a continuation of it in the very next scene. And obviously, as she's going to be reading that letter, you hear even more of it. And, things change. We get more technology. We get into, different eras. But the mob mentality for humans is as strong now as it's ever been. And back then, you're all getting together in a church to scream or point guns at the guy when he first rides into town. And now you just take people down with a social media Twitter mob or something. I think just basic one thing Mel Brooks does brilliantly in those two scenes that are back to back is show that people can be quick to not think for themselves, and they can change. One person changes their opinion quickly, and they will just flip what they believe, and how stupid that can be, and how just uninformed and kind of that tribal mentality, I guess you might say.
Well, it is scary how a mob can go wrong so fast. And what is the meme that none of us are as dumb as all of us? And, it's got the one idiot and then the whole mob full of idiots. So that mob mentality is pretty scary.
Yes.
Well, with my background, I initially, I don't do this for a living, but I wanted to, and I thought I did until I realized I had no patience for people who whine a lot, but I was going to be a psychologist, and that's my degree in psychology. And we did a lot of study on mob mentality and how an everyday, ordinary, good, upstanding citizen can literally allow themselves to be driven by the basest level of the mob, that they just sink to whatever the rest of the mob is already doing, because in their minds, they're saying, well, everybody else is now doing it, I'll do it too. And it's weird how the mob takes on its own mentality of, talk about chaos, of what is the lowest common denominator. It doesn't rise to the level of the highest, it sinks to the level of the lowest.
And so is Mel Brooks using that in those scenes to make his own personal appeal to how he thinks the mob mentalities about certain racial issues are prevalent in that time, and obviously he's portraying the mob as being dumb.
It is,
and therefore right, and so the mob is stupid. And so is he then saying that the way that the mob reacts to black people in general is stupid? And if he is saying that, I think
you
it's
and
a
I
brilliant
and Walt,
satire.
we would all agree that Blazing Saddles may be the most brilliant satire to deal with racism that's ever been done.
Yeah, it is.
It's outstanding. It really is.
And probably effectively dismantles racism better than any other movie in history.
Well, let's go into this for just a second, because we do now live in a very hypersensitive, hyper-politically correct environment. We live in a time of microaggressions, safe spaces, trigger words. Does it feel like we now need more than ever a movie like this to get us past the surface and realize, don't get hung up on the stupid surface level. Look for the deeper meaning first. Try to figure out what's being said instead of saying, oh, it's a microaggression, I'm triggered, I can't listen to you anymore, la, 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 la.
I think so. I think it's very important for a movie. I think we talked about this in the previous episode, too. It would be very hard for Blazing Saddles to even get approval to be in a theater today because of, some of the language and the way that the PC culture is now. But sometimes the things that are not PC can be the most helpful, and in terms of combating issues and talking about them. Because if you don't talk about issues, you're never going to solve anything. And comedy is one of those things, kind of like baseball in its day many years ago was helpful in helping move America forward on certain issues. Comedy breaks down barriers, people find common ground, those kind of things. And Mel Brooks appeals to a lot of different people, no matter their background. And race, ethnicity, gender, identity, all of those things. And comedy is a great great unifier in that sense, I think.
And I think that one of the things that is really interesting about comedy is that it can be one of the real unifiers in culture. And when we start to find the same things funny, and we start to have comedians who really can address cultural issues without being shouted down, it really does help us to understand who we are better.
Yeah, here's the thing about comedy, and what I worry about is we live in a time where you are so sensitive. So many people, I almost would argue they don't have a sense of humor, or it's only funny if it's ripping somebody they hate.
Well, I agree with you, and there was a time when you can, regardless of your political affiliation, you should be able to laugh at things that are funny. I mean,
right.
It's Dave Chappelle makes a lot of good points about that, I think, in those stand-up specials that he did for Netflix, where he's like, if it's, even if it's offensive, even if it's, he's talking about how he's a Democrat, Republican, but he just loves comedy and just wants to deliver the things that he believes are comedic, and that there's no rules when it comes to comedy. If it's funny, it's funny.
Right. And by the way, it's not going to be funny to everybody. Just like horror movies don't appeal to everybody and rom-coms don't appeal to everybody, but there's an audience for that. Don't shout down the rom-com because you don't like it. Don't go see it.
Right. I'm not going to see Chocolat, but I'm not mad at somebody else for watching it.
I think that's what bothers me the most, is that we're in a time where it's not just, I don't like it, so I'm not watching it. I don't like it, so nobody's allowed to watch it. And that is the most immature, childish, and selfish attitude you can possibly have.
Yeah, it actually, that kind of mentality allows the worst parts of humanity to continue to survive, because you're not addressing it. You're not talking about it. You're afraid to talk about it, so you don't bring any of this stuff up. And what is it Barack Obama said? I think he was paraphrasing someone else, but that sunlight is the best disinfectant.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're allowed to just run roughshod over everybody else with your ideas because you're the loudest person, your ideas never get the maturing and beating that they really need to hone it and to evaluate whether it's valid.
All right. Well, we do get a monologue here to close out the minute. Reverend Johnson does tell everybody,
now everyone be quiet, whilst we listen to Harriet Van Johnson, our esteemed schoolma'am, as she reads a telegram that she herself has composed to the governor, expressing our feelings about the new sheriff.
And then turns into a smile. It's a great delivery by Liam Dunn.
Well, one thing that keeps coming back to mind with me is Liam Dunn looks so much better right now than he does in that scene in Blazing Saddles, and it's kind of sad.
Wait, that scene in Blazing Saddles?
Liam Dunn looks so much better in this scene in Blazing Saddles than he does in Young Frankenstein.
Yeah, I mean, Young Frankenstein was only a year later when they were shooting.
It's really sad.
And he looks so frail as the Mr. Hilltop. But here, he's delivering a great monologue that has at least 3 shifts in his tone. First, it's authoritative. Then he's talking complimentary about the esteemed schoolmarm. And then he talks about our true feelings about the sheriff, and it's like turns hateful. And then immediately the most pleasant, like welcoming, hey, I'm the parish priest, or I'm the reverend. Welcome to my platform. I mean, it's wonderful.
Oh, it is. It is. It's just a little hard to watch sometimes because of that. But it's a great monologue that he has there, and you're right. That turn to her from being the intense, fire and brimstone kind of guy to turn around to her and just kind of give the reverend smile and walk off is great.
I mean, it's a scowl when he delivers that last line about our feelings about the new sheriff. I mean, it's downright angry.
Yeah, it really is.
And something that he knew that character would know in that time would have been, he wouldn't have been expected to have any decorum or any, respect of any kind for the sheriff in that setting. It would have been okay for him, even as a preacher, to talk horribly about someone he didn't even know simply based on their race.
Well, this is where the minute actually ends. You see, he's putting on the grin. We get him in profile. He starts the golf clap that everybody starts to imitate as well. So we know Harriet's about to come up and take the stage. So before we close this minute 31 up, Kevin, I'll go to you first. Do you have anything left in your minutes or anything? Do you have anything left in your notes about this minute?
I think we really have hit a lot on the mob mentality stuff, and even how something as formal as a minister in a church was able to be informal just out of anger over something that was race related in that time. And it's part of the overall satire of the movie that Mel Brooks uses to break down his thoughts on that. And early 70s, I'm sure that was considered a lot more, probably would have been a lot less popular of an outlook that Mel Brooks had than it would be today also. And there was some courage and some bravery on the part of the people that made this movie to say the things that they did say in a satirical way in this film. And also, just maybe, I don't know if it's my very favorite scene in the whole movie, but one of them is coming up where you have seen where Gene Wilder's hanging upside down, and the two of them meet. I know that scene's right around the corner, and you guys will be analyzing that, but that's a doozy too.
That may be one of my all-time favorite introductions of two people that you could then argue turns into a buddy cop movie. That, even though this is a Western, you get the two of the pairing, you get these two folks, you're going to get Gene Wilder as the Waco Kid. It is probably one of the most memorable how did these two meet scenes of any kind of buddy cop movie I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's a great one. He likes to play chess and screw, and that's what they're going to do. One of those two things. And drink.
But if he don't eat, he is going to die.
When?
Well, anything in your notes that we didn't cover?
No, I think we covered it.
Excellent. All right, Kevin, I know you gave us Friday a kind of a rundown of what you do, but let's just very quickly tell people if they are interested in maybe following you on social media or maybe tuning in to one of your play-by-plays, especially when it comes to baseball, where can they go?
Yeah, it's I do as part of our radio station, Rome Radio Partners. We have 6 stations. One of them is a sports station, which is where I work, and we carry all the Rome Braves games, and I do the play-by-play for them. You can go to romebraves.com to take a look at their schedule, and you can listen to all of our broadcasts there. Go to our radio station page at 995thejock.com. Listen to all of our live broadcasts. And my Twitter handle, if anybody wants that, is at Kevin, Kevin, Karel, Karel 21. And I do quite a bit of tweeting, more than at any other time of year during baseball season. And it's more of a work than a personal Twitter page, I guess you might say. But I will occasionally let my my loves of TV and movies bleed over into that as well, with Game of Thrones or Seinfeld or one of the other great shows that my impeccable taste has allowed me to enjoy.
Yes, sir. Walt, where can people learn a little bit more about the Wilder Ride?
2 places you can go to find us are thewilderride.com on the interwebs, or you can find us at facebook.com/thewilderride and join the listeners group from there. You're going to get more of us than you can possibly stand and a whole lot of fun from a lot of our listeners.
And though we said 2 places, we are also on Twitter and we are also on Instagram, and everything is under the Wilder Ride. We don't have to add a number. We don't have to change our name. We don't have to abbreviate. Everywhere you go, you just search for the Wilder Ride.
So, Alan.
I didn't end yet. I was just didn't want to know if you had anything else you wanted to say.
No, I've got nothing else.
You got nothing?
I am a blank slate.
All right.
I am tabula rasa.
All right. Well, before I tell you what's coming up tomorrow, Kevin, thank you so much for taking time with us out of your busy schedule. I know baseball is just around the corner as we're recording this. So thank you so much for being here on our Wilder Ride.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin.
Thanks for having me, guys. Really enjoyed it. Walt's been good talking with you, and hope to meet you sometime soon and can maybe enjoy some season 4 Seinfeld episodes.
You got that right, man.
And Alan, I'll see you at trivia, my friend.
You will. Well, come back tomorrow then, Tuesday, for a continuing minute. We're going to move into minute number 32. The applause inside the church will then give way to Harriet Van Johnson taking the stage. And we end with another callback to, oh, the Camptown racetrack 5 miles long. Oh, the doodah day, as Sheriff Bart is putting up some posters in the jail. But for all of that, you've got to come back tomorrow for this, the Wilder Ride.
And Alan's explanation of Nietzsche's view on Blazing Saddles.
Oh, blow it out your ass. With a giant hose up your nose. With the rubber hose.
This is really becoming too much for my brain.
How many references can we fit in one episode? A 1, a 2, wait, that's the wrong thing. 3. Walt? Uh-oh. Did we lose Walt?
Can you hear me?
Now we got him. There he is.
Yeah, there's a mute button on my phone, and on my mic, and for some reason I don't know how to operate that. So what I was
we referenced the Hillbilly Dictionary one more time.
That's hillbillydictionary.com. brought to you by the Wilder Ride. Well, I think comedy is one of the most important.
Oh, wait a minute. What's going on in the background now?
There he is.
You're still on?
I hear like a television or something on.
Yeah.
Oh, God. All right.
That's awesome.